I get spam calls all day long on this stupid thing. Yeah. Must have got it yesterday.
Are we ready to start? Got the green light? All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so glad you are able to make it out to this session today. There's so many great things I think that we're able to share that I think is going to be a benefit to the community. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is how we can engage industry in helping us get to that final mark that we want to be. My name is Donald Parker. I am the DISA, DOD PKI PM. Part of our responsibility is sustaining and maintaining the DoD PKI infrastructure that all of the Department of Defense utilize, including several of our federal partners. And so we have a great job, a serious opportunity to do great work in providing these enterprise capabilities. We have a coalition of partners that we're in covenant with, NSA being the PKI PM, DISA serving as the Deputy PKI PM, and DISA serving as also as the sustainment arm for majority of the DoD PKI program. DMDC also serves some portions of sustainment as relates to DEERs and SDEERs. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is PKI. I want to show you what it looks like. You know, a lot of times when people think about PKI, it's only relegated to what they saw in school when they was in a technical class of cryptography, when they saw a scenario with Alice and Bob talking about how they send a classified or a email communication. And what you saw from that was Alice as the sender sending Bob an email, and they talked about how we leverage or utilize public key cryptography using a recipient's public key to encrypt that information, and that receiver decrypting it with his private key. But there's so much more to PKI than just that. That's the basis, that's the foundation, how we secure information, how we secure our resources, how we secure our data. But when you're providing an enterprise capability to the entire Department of Defense, there's several capabilities that's used in order to do that work. For example, let's just say that you work for me in the Department of Defense, and for some reason, Markeisha, she gets fired or she loses her job, but she still have that CAT card. She still have that SIPR token. I've got to have a way of ensuring that she's not able to access my network. But she still has that token that has 3 years left on it. And so how do I do that? I have to have some way of validating whether that individual is able to authenticate onto our network or onto our system. And so we're going to talk about all of those capabilities that's being leveraged within the DoD, and we're going to talk about some of the problem areas and how I'm going to look to industry in order to help me to resolve this problem. Of course, we've got the disclaimer. Just take a few seconds to read that. And just in case we have someone who can't see it, the information provided in this briefing is general information purposes only. It does not constitute a commitment on behalf of the United States government to provide any of the capabilities, systems, or equipment presented, and in no way obligates the United States government to enter into any future agreements with regard to the same. The information presented may not be disseminated without the express consent of the United States government. We all right with that? All right. All right, so this is just a snapshot of kind of what we are, right, and what we're going to be talking about. It really talks about a bird's eye view of our capabilities, and I'm going to go through each one of them to make sure that you understand kind of what our program offers and what we do. But the real thing is PKI, and why does it matter? PKI is very important. It gives us the basics of providing confidentiality, integrity, authorization, and authentication, and non-repudiations of services. That's very important to the work that we do. And so it plays a role in every aspect of our federal government services. But one of the main things I want to talk about first is TMS. So the token management system, that's part of our increment 2 capabilities that's transitioning from NSA to DISA, but it's a capability that we currently sustain. And so why is that capability so important, and why do we use it today? It increases the security of the SIPR net, our classified environment, and provides that confidentiality, that integrity, that authentication, and that non-repudiation of services. Another thing that it does, it improves security by leveraging PKI credentials for what? Authentication, for strengthening accountability across our classified environment, the SIPR net, by tracking access to those PKI credentials. It satisfied the DoD CIO's mandate to provision all SIPRnet users with PKI credentials or tokens for SIPRnet access. So this capability is very important, and it's a capability that we currently sustain within our PKI environment. Another thing I want to talk about before I go to Global Directory Service is we maintain and manage a host of certificate authorities. And that's important because when I begin to talk about how I need industry help to solve our problems, this is going to be one of the major areas I think that's going to be a focal point of how we need to partner with industry to help us to become a lot more effective and efficient in what we're doing. When we look at the certificate authorities, we're saying just something about a certificate authority. For those who don't know, it's an entity or system that stores, that signs and issues digital certificates. The PKI program sustains all CAs, all certificate authorities required to support the DoD and some of our federal partners. These CAs normally have a lifespan of 6 to 10 years. So when we look at our unclassified environment, these certificate authorities that we manage normally have a lifespan of about 6 years. 3 years we issue, 3 years we go into maintenance mode. And once we get to that 2.5 year point, 2 to 2.5 year point, we've got to build up another CA to take the place of that issuance CA that's getting ready to go into maintenance mode. And likewise, on the classified side, those certificate authorities have a 10-year lifespan. So that's a lot of work that we have to do, a lot of maintaining of physical infrastructure to maintain this DoD PKI program. And the certificate authorities are like the heartbeat of our program. It's a continual process of building and developing and implementing these physical capabilities to provide a DoD enterprise service to our stakeholders. So I want our industry partners to keep in mind what we're doing in that space, because when we get to the end of the brief, we're going to make some suggestions of how we feel that we can better move forward with sustaining that program. Now, the Global Directory Service, that is a very important piece. That's like the mind of PKI. It's very important. What does it do? It provides the centralized repository for the DoD PKI system. It's very important. It also provides certificate revocation data and basic white page information. For example, information like the name, email address, public mail encryption certificate. It provides all of those things. It is utilized by all of DoD for checking certificate revocation and public email certificate lookup. Now, one of the things that we're moving towards is you're going to see that even with this is you're going to see we're in the ICAM space, you know, identity credentialing and access management. Of course, PKI is the credentialing piece of that capability. And as we start to align ourselves with ICAM, even this Global Directory Service, PKI Global Directory Service, is being utilized as that public repository for the Global Federated User Directory. I believe the GFUD capability within ICAM. So we're starting to work and align ourselves with ICAM as we begin to move forward with continuing to provide enterprise capability to our warfighter. This also is used, the CRLs are used in certificate validation operations. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of that when we get to that last capability, our RCVS. So the next capability I want to talk about is the Common Service Provider. This is one of the few programs where we provide an enterprise capability to a select a handful of 11 participating agencies in our federal space. So what are we providing? We're actually providing in a nutshell, we're actually providing a token management capability on the classified network that has been tailor-made for those 11 participating agencies. And what do? We're responsible for operating that infrastructure, providing certificate lifecycle management to those participating agencies, including certificate authority systems, providing RA service, which is registration authority services, to support certificate issuance. But some of the major things that we provide on this NSS National Security System PKI capability is we issue certificates, we escrow keys, we manage cards, we recover keys, we recover certificates, we manage the infrastructure, and we provide certificate information. So these are other things outside of the DoD that we work in the space for our federal partners. The next thing I want to talk about is something, a capability that really everybody within the DoD loves, and that's Purebred. Purebred is a capability that provides a secure, scalable method of distributing software certificates for DoD PKI subscribers used on commercial mobile devices. The system first established trust, in device certificates used to encrypt configuration data bound to that device, then permits a subscriber to demonstrate possession and usage of their CAC to generate 2 new derived credentials and recover existing email encryption keys. But in a nutshell, to make a long story short, Purebred is the DoD enterprise capability that provides derived credentials for authentication on mobile devices. So that's what it does. Back in the day when we would come to these conferences, you would see us with our mobile devices, you would see us with a CAC sled. We had this sled device, and we would put our CAC in there, and it would allow us to authenticate to certain websites. It will allow us to encrypt and sign digital emails. We no longer have to have that CAC sled anymore because those certificates that's on that CAC card are now being derived in the Purebred app. And so that's one of the benefits that we utilize on the Purebred space for all mobile devices. And now, because of how effective and efficient Purebred has been, now the community, which is our DoD stakeholders, are now looking to leverage the same type of technology and capability on the classified front. So what are we doing? We're going to give them what they asked for. So we have now rolled out, in the beginning phases of an enterprise capability, rolling out what we call SIPR Purebred. I believe Aaron calls it, what do you call it?
SIPR.
He called it SIPR. He's kind of shortened it up a little bit. And so we're providing this capability. We started with SOCOM first and rolling out a SIPR Purebred capability, and now providing this enterprise-wide capability for their requirements. We're now working the enterprise requirements with the expectation that every device within the DoD community will be able to leverage SIPR Purebred by not having to have a physical token, but able to have a SIPR Purebred app on that device so that they can be able to authenticate, sign on to emails, encrypted emails, and things like that. So that's some of the capabilities that we're doing on the Purebred front. The next capability is another important one, and that's called the non-person's entity. This is another capability like TMS that's part of the DoD PKI capabilities that's transitioning to DISA. What that means is NSA still owns it, but DISA sustains the capability. And so what is NPE? It provides certificates to devices, non-persons, devices, mobile devices, web servers, network equipment, from trusted certificate authorities on both the unclassed and classified environment. NPE is one of DoD PKI certificate and token issuance systems within the DoD PKI. The interesting thing about NPE is that, let's just say I have we understand it provides certificates to non-person entities. And where it becomes very effective is when I have 50 servers that I'm looking to implement within my capabilities or within my system. Instead of going one-on-one and trying to get digital certificates for one, I'm able to use NPE to issue out digital certificates to all of those devices so that they can be authorized to be on that network. And so this capability is going to allow us to greatly improve our workflow, our process, and how we sustain and how we implement equipment or devices onto our classified and unclassified networks. So MPE is a valuable requirement, it's a valuable capability, it's a valuable system that we're sustaining and looking forward to it totally transitioning to DISA sometime in this calendar year. The next capability we're going to talk about is the gray CA. For a long time, even maybe 4 or 5 years ago when I used to be one of the senior engineers in the multinational information sharing community, one of the things that we wanted more than anything was a global great network. We were looking at how do we push forth our commercial solutions for classified capabilities using a great network, and we were beating on DISA's door to provide this capability, especially for the coalition environment. The coalition environment was tired of using TAC lanes, which required a lot of time. Everybody couldn't get access to these NSA Type 1 cryptographic devices. And we wanted to be in that fight tonight scenario where we can, from an episodic perspective, build up a network real quick. But we had to have some type of mechanism where we do that. And so we were looking at the global gray core to allow us to be able to do that type of thing. Well, a portion of that global gray capability is now being sustained within my program. And this is very important. So what are we doing here in this space? We are deploying an outer gray PKI infrastructure for current and future commercial solutions for classified capabilities. So that's important. And right now we are meeting DISA's requirements as they're leveraging the gray core or the gray CA for these capabilities, but we're open for business to the DoD enterprise so much from the point that they can now start leveraging our capability that we have in place. And so that's a big win for a lot of people, especially those that are in the coalition space. So, you know, if you're part of the DoD, Combatant Command Service Agency, you want to leverage our gray network, our gray CA, you can talk to me after service and after this session, and we can talk about how we get you connected so that you can start benefiting what DISA has produced as it relates to this enterprise offering. All right, so the next one is the robust certificate validation service. Now that's very important, RCVS. So RCVS is like a name brand, right? Our name brand capability for our online certificate status protocol capability. And what does it do? It utilizes RCVS. So the PKI program utilizes RCVS as the DoD PKI OCSP solution. It's one of the mechanisms for determining the revocation status of digital certificates, those 8X.509 certificates. Certificate validation can be performed by RCVS. It also can be performed by the Global Directory Service, but we like to use RCVS to work in that space. So we really use RCVS to transform the CRL data into an OCSP database where the certificate lookup is very efficient. It's very quick. It's a lot more easier doing this within the RCVS space than it is going to our Global Directory Service capabilities. But Global Directory Service is like the repository for CRL productions that RCVS uses in order to do its checks and revocation. This system is really important, and one of the scenarios that I gave earlier about if somebody's working for you and they lose their job or they no longer works for you, how do you ensure that they're not able to leverage your network when they didn't turn in their CAT card or their SIPR token? And we do that using RCVS. It aids in authentication, so it goes through those checks to validate that you are authorized or that your certificate is still valid before they will allow access to that environment. So that's very important. Now, before I go to my next slide, are there any questions? Great. All right, so actually, what's next? Let me take a minute here. So what's next? So one of the things that you're going to hear a lot about if you've been paying attention to the DoD CIO and paying attention to kind of what's going on in the PKI space is cryptographic modernization. A lot of people have been talking about quantum cryptography and quantum resistant algorithms, and PKI is no longer going to be a thing when quantum is made realized. And we recognize that, and so we're working towards that front. Remember, all of DoD relies on DISA to provide an enterprise PKI capability that all the DoD leverages, including federal partners. So one of the things we're doing is we're ensuring that we become proactive and not reactive in our response to how technology is moving following NIST guidelines and direction. So one of the things we're doing is we're saying, how can we start getting prepared for quantum? And that goal is to increase our cryptographic algorithms so that we bring the entire DoD and our federal partners along with us, ensuring that they will upgrade their infrastructure to bring in quantum-resistant algorithms, to increase the size of current algorithms, so that once we get to a place where quantum is realized, we can move and we can walk right into it. So there's a major effort underway for us in that space, making sure that everything that we do from a PKI space is strengthened outside of what we're currently doing now. So we've got major guidelines, major guidance, policy that's being pushed out that gives us some directions in dealing with cryptographic modernization, and a lot of those efforts are currently underway. The other thing that we're looking for in the space of what's next for the DoD PKI program is commercial cloud. So we've been talking about commercial cloud for a long time. I don't know, maybe 10 years. We've been talking about commercial cloud can be a better means of sustaining our capabilities, allow us to be a lot more fluent, a lot more agile. We could be able to take on more capabilities quickly and easily than our traditional way of doing business, spin up a virtual private cloud, easily put it in there. And so that's now the realization. You've seen a lot of work that DISA has done in the cloud space with some of their cloud offerings. And so now it's, how does the DoD PKI program looks within the cloud? The PKI program is like no other program, right? It's governed by DoD PKI policy. It's governed by certificate practice statements that control what we do. You know, we're in general, policy in general is not a friend of cloud, right? But we recognize where technology is going. And in order for us to be a lot more effective and efficient, we know that we have to move into this space. So what are we doing? We're evaluating this. We're seeing, can commercial cloud offer us the same like security, increased functionality, decreased sustainment costs, so it will allow us to be a lot more effective and efficient in sustaining the program. So these are some of the things that we are evaluating now. How does the DoD PKI program look like in the cloud? How about a hybrid cloud environment? Can we somehow have a hybrid cloud environment where there's some things that we don't want to be in a multi-tenant environment? We want to have hands-on ourselves, those things that's personal. You know, the DoD, we like to hold things close to our hearts. So there's some capabilities that we have, we don't want it shared. We don't want it in a multi-tenant environment. We don't want nobody else to control. So it may be that we look at a hybrid cloud model where those specific capabilities or those specific pieces or those specific devices that policies say that we just have to have and hold dear to our heart, we'll put that in a data center where we'll direct connect it to some cloud service provider, and whatever we can leverage in the cloud, then we'll do it. So we're looking at that as well. And we're trying to see, is that an option? Is that an opportunity for us to be able to move or transition this program? Then another thing that we're looking for is PKI as a service. Now, if we can pull that off, I mean, it will create an atmosphere where we can be a lot more effective in how we sustain and deliver enterprise capabilities to our warfighter. I talked to you all earlier, before I got into the capabilities, I talked about our certificate authorities. I talked about how it's an ongoing process of us developing and implementing and pushing out a CA, how they have 6-year and 10-year lifespans, and how we're managing all of this physical infrastructure And we've got to push these things out to make sure that we're offering this enterprise capability. But what if I can get that as a service? What if I can validate that PKI as a service, certificate authority capabilities being provided as a service, can work in this space? We have NSA, we have JITIC, we have the pen testers test it out, evaluate it. And what if it's just as secure, if not more secure than what we're doing now? What would this do for the DoD? What would it do for DISA and how we sustain these enterprise capabilities? So we're looking at all of these things to see how we can leverage these enterprise capabilities so that we can better sustain our capabilities. And that's one of the things that we're doing, PKI as a service. Another thing we're looking at is HSMs as a service. If anybody know about HSMs, they're hardware security modules. They're like the keys to the kingdom. They're things that stores our cryptographic keys. We hold it dear. And they're strictly governed by certificate practice statements as what we can use for those devices. But what if we can leverage HSMs as a service? And I no longer have to spend $40,000 a pop to sustain all those HSMs that I currently have to sustain. What if I can leverage that as a service? See and look at industry and have it tested, have it validated, and it comes back that it's just as secure, if not more secure, than what we're doing now. How more effective and efficient will DISA and the DoD be if we're able to do this? And this is where we're going to be looking at industry. Where industry at? This is where we're going to be looking at industry to kind of help us to get to that resolve. And I'm going to start talking about how we're trying to get at that to kind of go into that direction. All right. So this is a PKI Modernization Goals and Strategy Support. It's a really important a slide that pretty much gives you our goals as it relates to our strategy. And then we're going to talk about industry support. So when we look at this slide, you know, we talk about modernization a lot. There's a lot of conversation about modernization, but we're not just talking about tech refreshes. We're not just talking about an upgrade. We're talking about the whole thing, how we do business. Because remember, PKI is the DoD PKI program is very secure. It's very tight. It's governed by policy. Nothing gets in. We control what goes out. It's very tightly controlled. And it's controlled that way because security is our main focus. But it's expensive to sustain, and we're not as efficient in being able to provide this enterprise PKI capability quickly. It doesn't allow us to be as agile as we want to be in this time and space. I have to be able to move quickly when my leadership tells me we have a new capability that we want you to bring into the PKI portfolio. And they don't want to hear me say, I need $2 million. I need $3 million. I need $5 million. They don't want to hear that large investment that's needed to do something simple. But when you look at our legacy infrastructure, it requires that type of investment because of how tightly controlled we are. Right? It's in the prehistoric ages, but it's tight and it's secure. But what we're trying to find out is how can we modernize using the latest and greatest in technological innovation that's going to give us not only the same level of security, but greater security so that we can become more effective and efficient. And that's the way DISA, that's the way the DoD PKI actually want to do business. So when we're talking about modernization, we're talking about a change in the entire thing in how we do business. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to be able to get to the place where we are addressing those emergent requirements, right? So we talked about the hybrid cloud environment. We talked about some of those things. And so some of the goals within the hybrid cloud environment, we kind of touched on it before, is we need to address those emerging requirements like we talked about global grade, we talked about SIPR mobile credentialing, that capability that everybody wants. There's the public trust capability that the DoD CIO is getting and knocking at our door to provide that capability. We're talking about cryptographic modernization and quantum cryptography. We feel that we will be able to have a better way of moving out on these capabilities with accepting these emerging technologies if we modernize our environment. We want to be able to realize operation and sustainment costs and resource efficiency. Everybody want to be able to operate more effective and efficient. I don't know about you, but we have to be looking at ways of reducing and cutting costs by taking on new requirements that secure every year. So for the DoD, every year we have to be evaluating and examining how we do business so that we can be a lot more effective. Money don't grow on trees anymore within the DoD. So we have to find ways of getting after those efficiencies so that we can sustain these enterprise technological capabilities in a better way. One of the things we want to do is alleviate dependency on God's products, right? So can we get commercial off-the-shelf products that we're able to utilize within our portfolio that will allow those capabilities to be supported? Now, we're always going to have a mix of GOTS. I know Dan is saying, Don, you know, we got GOTS and COTS now, and you never can get away from it all. But the goal is to leverage COTS products as much as possible. Why? Because it comes with support. There's an update that's needed. We get it from industry. We got to put in a patch. We roll it out. With GOTS, it requires a lot of manpower. It requires the government to be in tune with being able to write scripts and do updates and do all these types of things that we really don't want to do. I want to be able to have a product that's totally supported so that I can think about other things and how to expand the enterprise offerings that we're offering, opposed to having to deal with managing and maintain GOTS products. So we're looking to move towards GOTS. We want to update existing infrastructure to current technology, and we talked about that. And that's something that we're seeking after. Now, what are the challenges that we have in this front? I've talked to you about DoD PKI policy. I talked about certificate practice statements. I don't know if I have any DoD CIO, PKI people in the house right here, but they're very territorial and very aware of ensuring that we stay true to our policies and to our mandates. So some of our challenges is we have what we call two-party control, or TPI, two-person integrity. If a person goes and access this computer, he's got to be with two people. Somebody goes in the closet and open up a door, it's got to be with two people. Somebody go and open up that server room or that cage, it's got to be with two people. And so the whole idea is we want to decrease the insider threat to our network, and so policy mandates that we do these types of things. But if we're leveraging the latest and greatest in technological innovation, is there some insider threat detect capabilities or tools that we can leverage that can take the place of TPI? Maybe there is. Maybe industry is going to tell me, Don, I'm going to call you after this. I got an answer for you. And they may show us how we can deal with those challenges. How there's insider threat detect type tools that's out there that we can leverage that meets that requirement. And if we can prove to the policymakers that this is effective, that this is more secure or just as secure, we validate it, then we get it proved, we update the certificate practice statements, and then we're able to roll it out. And so these are the types of things that we're looking for. These are the types of things that we have to deal with, right? And maybe in the hybrid cloud environment, we can still leverage TPI. Maybe we can do TPI. Maybe we still can have two-person integrity in a hybrid cloud environment. So we're trying to look at all of those things. Another thing is privileged roles. We've got limited use of shared infrastructure and hardware level security and funding. So DoD PKI policy don't like multi-tenant environments. Even within our government space, they want us to be separated from our brothers. It's that strict, it's that tight. Matter of fact, they want us to be in a separate room, stuck all by itself. And so these are some of the challenges that we have and why it's so expensive to sustain. But how do we get after it? How do we leverage capabilities today to get after the basic premise, which is a security issue? Can we mitigate the DoD PKI policy's concern with that security issue by leveraging a certain capability or technology that we can implement within our space? Is there micro-segmentation capabilities? Is there other types of capabilities that we can leverage in order to get after that space, in order to deal with that policy? And that's what we're looking for industry to kind of help us on that front. The other thing, we talk about hardware level security. We talk about certain equipment that we have to have. As you know, we've got a 10.5 or so data retention policy where we have to store data for 10.5 years on specific certain types of medium. I won't talk about what that medium is, but can we utilize modern technology to answer the security concern by the policymakers, whereby we can get approval to leverage that capability? And that's what we want to be able to do. And that's what we're looking for industry to help us to solve. These are all those things. So these are some of the challenges that we're looking about. When we talk about funding, funding is always a challenge, right? Funding is always the issue. But what the government is looking for us to do is to be smart. It's looking for us to not waste. It's looking for us to be a lot more effective. It's looking for us to find those efficiencies, which we can. But we just have to do the hard work. We have to do the research. We have to do the evaluation. We have to put forth that strategy and that plan so that we can begin to be effective in what we do. And that's vitally important. So another thing we're talking about is strategy, right? You know, we look at the strategy and kind of where we're trying to go. So one of the things is we know that we cannot do this without our industry partners. We cannot do what we do without contract support. We rely so heavily on industry to help us to get to where we need to be so that we can be effective in providing enterprise capabilities. So you're going to see soon, acquisition activities happening that's going to allow industry to compete and to give us proposals in how we do the types of things that I'm talking about now. And so we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're serious about what we're doing because we're looking for industry to help us with this, and we're going after it. Hopefully we'll have an RFP released in about a week or two, and industry can go out and start looking at our requirements and start submitting proposals to help us get after some of the things that we're talking about today. And that's vitally important. So we've got to obtain that contract support, industry's help, in order for us to get after doing these enterprise offerings. We want to evaluate PKI service offerings. That's important. I think that's one of the first things that we would have been looking at is how much of PKI as a service offering can we leverage? And I talked about some of that earlier, PKI as a service, HSMs as a service. We need you smart people to kind of tell us to be able to evaluate our portfolio, to evaluate our requirements, to evaluate what we're doing, and to tell us what you're doing is prehistoric and here's a better way of doing it. This is how you can become a lot more efficient, save a lot of money, and you can be a lot more responsive to emerging technology. This is what we're looking from industry. See, I already have a certain plan, I already have a certain idea, but I'm looking for smarter people to help me to get to where we need to be. Because my leadership is looking at me and they want us to roll out, provide these enterprise offerings, and they want us to be effective and efficient in what we're doing. And when new capabilities come in, they want us to have a platform that's available to be able to easily bring them in, spin up a VM or spin up whatever we need to do to bring that capability in. So we have to do that due diligence, and I'm going to be leaning on industry very hard in order to help me to get after that space. So another thing is, again, update DoD PKI policy, right? So we're bound by policy, right? But I don't want us to be hindered by what the policy says. What do I mean by that? So policy, lots of times are old. It takes years to update policy sometimes. We got certificate practice statements that talk about in details how we do business. But I don't want industry to say, oh, you can't do this, so we can't go to the cloud. No, 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 no. I want you all to look at the intent of the policy and what it's trying to do, the purpose of the policy, which is based and bound in security. So I need industry to say, hey, I understand what the DoD policyholders in NSA was meaning by this old policy. I know what they was trying to get after, but technological capabilities are so advanced that we can get after this by doing this. And as a result of doing that, we test it, we validate it, and we make sure that if it gets approved from validation, now we're able to update certificate practice statements. We're able to update our DoD PKI policy so that we can implement that into the DoD PKI program. And so that's what we're trying to do. So we don't want anybody to be hindered by policy, but we want you to be able to understand the policy. That's very important. Understand the policy and say, we know how we can move out and help to update policy or help change policy because we have capabilities that we know to meet the intent of that. And so now we're able to roll out some enterprise capabilities to be able to do that. So that's how we want our industry partners to start thinking. And the next thing is to transition to the modernized environment. So what is the goal? We've got to assess, we design, we build, we engineer, we test, we get NSA pen testers, we get JITIC, we get all the people that we need, the DISA AO, all the people, RME, all the people engaged in the evaluation of these new capabilities, test them and validate them, prove that they're secure and reliable and efficient, that they meet functional requirements, that they meet security concerns, and then we go to the certificate practice working group, and we move towards updating a policy in order to do that. So that's our overall goal, because we want to have the opportunity of really modernizing and actually operating this important capability at an enterprise level, but doing it from an efficient perspective so that we can do a better job in sustaining those capabilities. Again, I've talked a lot about industry support. We talked about the storage medium requirements. We got a 10.5-year retention rate. We want to be in our RFP, you're going to see we're talking about that stuff, how we get after that stuff. And so we want to be able to see, is there something else that we can leverage whereby we may still have to do the 10.5 years, but is there another way that we can do it besides the prehistoric way that we do business now? It's secure. It's been validated. It's been proven. But can we use the latest and greatest technology to do a similar thing that's going to allow a lot more efficiencies? We talked about the multi-tenant environments and the challenge in the PKI space. Now, we know we have GovCloud. We have all these different types of things that we can use, and within that space, it's government type of equipment. But we want to be able to look within those environments, test them, evaluate them, and see if they meet the muster tests, the security concerns, so that we can be able to implement these things within our PKI environment. We talked about TPI and two-party controls. I think we can get after that, especially in a hybrid cloud environment. The question is there capabilities that exist now that will deal with the insider threat type thing that will allow us to implement so that that's no longer an issue? And so these are things I want to hear. These are things we want to evaluate. And then, of course, proving security controls for the hybrid cloud, and that's important. how do we get after those logical controls? How do we get after those physical controls? And that's going to be the requirement that we have and that we will prove in testing out these capabilities or these offerings that we're looking to assess in whether it's a hybrid cloud environment, whether it's a pure cloud environment, or whether it's a PKI as a service. We want to be able to prove all those things that's required to ensure that we are able to get after those enterprise, modernized, latest and greatest in technological innovation to implement it into our PKI environment. So I think I got about 15 more minutes, and I think at that time I'll ask my panel if they have anything that they want to add to that before we go into the questions. Panel, do anything that you all want to add to the discussion? Oh, they said they're good. Now these are some of the smartest people, engineers within the DoD PKI program. Julian Breyer, he's another one that's back there. Raise your hand, Julian. He's one of the most smartest engineers in DISA, and most definitely PKI. He's ducking, but that guy knows a whole lot, and so he kind of one of those founding members within the DoD PKI program. He moved on, but he's still within DISA, but very wise, very smart. And so at this time, we're going to open it up for questions. We got about 15 minutes. Again, I'm Donald Parker. You can see me afterwards, any of my panel. If we need to engage with you during this session, we're going to be here for the next 2 days. Or if we need to engage afterwards, I know industry partners probably want to come in, maybe do some demos, talking about their technological innovations. We're always open to learning and seeing what industry has to offer. And also I want to say, because we have a mix of people here, industry, we got government, we probably have some potential employees here. Hopefully for those people who are looking to come to the government and be part of something great, part of a program that's technologically savvy, that's doing great things for the DoD and the warfighter. Hopefully DISA will be your place, but mainly, hopefully the DoD PKI program within DISA will be that place of choice. So if you're here, we've got some engineers or some IT cyber specialists or some PMs that want to work in this space. Come and talk with us, and then we can kind of talk about offerings that we may have, things we got in the future, because DISA is a great place to work. All right, we're now opening it up for questions.
Hi, my name is Dinah Demuth. I work at DISA.
I used to work with Dinah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question for you is, in the best case scenario, how quickly would you like to convert your systems over to quantum resistance capabilities?
So did you all hear that?
I think she has about quantum.
So you said how soon are we looking to update our systems to get to quantum?
Yeah, best case scenario.
Okay, so I'll let Sophie answer that.
Yeah, we will basically want to follow the guidelines that are laid out by the National Security Agency, NSA. They already published publicly available documents, NSA 2.0, and they do establish transition timelines. We basically will follow that guideline.
Yeah, so we do. So we do have a timeline as it relates to how we get at that. We do actually have a time, but it hasn't been releasable yet. So you come and see me, I can tell you about it. But we do have a timeline to get after that, but it's just not publicly releasable at this point. All right. I know we got some other questions. I didn't answer everybody's question, did I? Oh my. We got 13 more minutes. All right.
Hello, Mr. Glover. I got a question for you, sir.
All right.
You mentioned that the RFP is coming out in a couple of weeks. Will there be a draft RFP or just going right into the solicitation process?
So the draft RFP have already went out.
Okay.
Right, Markeisha? Yes, that draft RFP has already went out. And so we've got comments back from industry. And of course, we did a whole lot of work responding to all those questions and concerns. So now we've got an RFP that's tight and right. And after we get our vice director's signature on our streamlined acquisition plan, DITCO is going to release that RFP. And he's waiting for it.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, my name is Donald Greenlee. I'm from the Corps of Engineers. Back in 2016, Mr. Halverson had spoken in this same forum about the DoD eventually getting rid of CAC cards. I haven't heard much about that. Can you address that, or is that still?
Dan, you want to address that? I will say it was a thing at one time. It was on the table at one time. But do you all know the latest to that conversation?
I mean, there hasn't really been a conversation about that conversation. It is really what it comes down to. It was,
No plans.
yeah, there's no plan to get away from them.
So I tell you that I do remember that conversation. I do remember that memo or whatever came out. But right now, it seemed like there's been a shift away from that. So there's no plans right now to get rid of the CAC card. Not right now.
Right, so our Purebred capability, is augmenting, right, the CAC card capability, right? So it kind of, with Purebred, you're not burdened with carrying CAC, but it's a derived credential, so you need to have a CAC to begin with, right? So we in the, in the short term, we're still planning on keeping the card. And including our Purebred credentials rely on it. So we will have it in the short term.
Right, because, when we talked about Purebred, and I talked about how everybody loves Purebred, especially on the unclassified front. We want it on the classified front. Everybody loves Purebred, but that's from derived credentials from a physical card. So on the unclass, it's the CAC. On the classified, it's the token. So no plans at this time. Next question.
Have you looked at simplifying the PKI infrastructure in the same way that FIDO did? Is that an option, or you just don't consider FIDO secure enough?
I'm not familiar with FIDO. Anybody want to answer that?
So, I mean, FIDO gives you certain assurances, but it doesn't give you the same kind of assurances that you get with the vetted certificates that we're minting and producing for folks. Part of that has to do with the process of issuance, where, DMDC is the partner for that and requires the multiple forms of identification. There's the biometric checking. It's just like an entirely different critter, really, than FIDO is.
Right. It uses the raw certificate. It uses the raw public key when you're negotiating with the FIDO service, which is how it gets the reduced footprint for its public key infrastructure. So you're saying that sticking with the certificate model, where the certificate secures the public key, is sort of where you're going to stay in the near future.
So we're staying where we have the private and public key pair. The certificate is the signed version of the public key pair.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? We've got about 7 more minutes. Come on, I know you've got some questions. I want to give a shout out to my director, Brian Herman. Dr. Brian Herman, that's the guy back there. So he's in the conversation, but just want to introduce you guys to him if just you don't know. Come on, Paul.
Hi, Mr. Parker. Are you going to do NIPR first, SIPR first, or in parallel?
So this is where we're going to be looking to industry, right? And so what we're putting out is our requirements. And we're not telling industry how to do it. We're looking for industry telling us how best they think it could be done. So we're going to be examining these proposals really good, and then selecting the best proposal that we feel will meet their requirements. But there is no direction or requirement that says NIPR has to be done first. All right, any other questions? All right.
So do you have an established transition plan to go from the current DoD PKI infrastructure and how it's implemented to this modern new version, I guess?
Right, so the modern new version hasn't been approved, right? You may have a follow-up. So the modern version may not have not been approved. So we have a strategy, right? And how we produce our requirements to kind of get after this modernization. We have a list of requirements that we're pushing out through an RFP. We're looking for industry to tell us how best to do that work. And then once we get that proposal and we make that selection, that's when we'll have that plan. Now, the plan is still going to be relegated on getting policy updated and certificate practice statements generated and approved before we move to that actual plan. So what are we going to have a hybrid cloud environment? Are we going to have PKI as a service? We don't know what that really will look like now, but we are putting everything on the table and looking for industry to do their homework because they're the smart people. We're looking for them to do the homework, give us a really good plan based on our requirements, and then we select the plan that best maps to where we're trying to go.
Okay, I guess so the follow-up question is the RFP to develop the plan and not to just sort of do the engineering to transition the infrastructure?
Right, so it's two things. So when you see that RFP that's going to come out, it's going to be talking about really, from a modernization perspective, it's going to be talking about all of these requirements that we have in our desire to modernize, right? To go from where we are to that next phase of technological innovation. It is going to be smart innovators that's going to say, I know a best way to do it. For example, you may be able to do it from a all cloud perspective. You may be able to do it as PKI as a service. You may be able to do this as a hybrid, from a hybrid cloud perspective. So they're going to come up with a plan within their proposal, and it's going to outline the things that they propose. Now, whichever one we select, right, based on best value trade-off, we're going to look at that, we're going to select it, and that plan is going to be there. Now, once they're on board, we're going to start working towards that plan. Now, like we said in our brief, that we're going to be looking at evaluating the security and the functionality of that process, whatever they're putting forward. And then once it's validated, tried and true, and we get certificate practice statements updated and policy updated, then we now can transition to that platform. It may be that PKI as a service, to some extent, may get approved. It may be that hybrid cloud, to some extent, might get approved. And it may be that straight cloud may get approved. Then what we look at, what is the best value? You know, what is it? What out of these approved capabilities can we move towards? So what we're going to actually do is going to be dependent upon the proposal that we receive. If that makes sense. All right. Any other questions? We've got 4 more minutes. Oh.
So, hey, Don. So currently there's CAs that are sitting in existing data centers, right? Mm-hmm. Is the thought that those would live out their useful life there, or would those be migrated to the cloud, or is it up to each bidder?
I'm looking for industry. I'm not going to tell industry how to do their job, right? So you may have some industry partners that says, hey, I know a way that I can securely move those out and into the cloud. Or you may have industry that says, oh no, you don't want to touch those. You want to let them die where they are, and then all your new stuff you do into the new environment. I'm looking for industry to tell me, I have limited knowledge. I'm looking for industry to tell me what their plan is for moving out on those requirements. So we're going to be looking rigorously through those proposals and looking at those offerings and evaluating them to see what is the best plan or proposal that's going to get us to where we need to be. Yes, sir.
One last question. Jim Payne from SecurG. You've given us a great picture of the openness and the innovation that you're expecting. Speak to us about the culture of DISA. Are your end users ready for innovation? Because you can only be as innovative as they allow you to be.
So the culture. So we provide capabilities for the entire DoD, right? So DISA is one customer out of all of DoD. So they're just one customer. Mm-hmm. I work in DISA, but we provide the PKI infrastructure for all of DoD and some federal partners. So DISA is a customer. So you're not going to care how things look. You're just going to want stuff to work. Mm-hmm. You don't care how Verizon manage their network or what changes they're making, as long as when you're looking at cable or you're looking at a channel, it ain't buffering. If things are buffering, now you got a problem. But as long as you're getting the functional capabilities that you require and it's seamless, you don't care. So we have to make sure from a functional perspective, that the capabilities are working as advertised and that we're providing increased efficiencies and capabilities across the portfolio with this modernization. The capabilities can't get worse, they have to get better. Now, so the people, the users, the million, how many users, Dan? 4 million. The 4 million users, they really don't care. They just want to know that it works. You know, it's like Ronco, set it and forget it. They just want it to work. Now, the people who care, and when you talk about culture, it's going to be NSA and it's going to be DoD-CIO. So they're going to be the ones that are mostly concerned from a culture perspective with what we're doing. But what DoD-CIO's major concern is going to be is that they want to make sure that whatever we do, that the policy backs up us first before we move out. That's why I had in the brief that we've got to make sure that whatever we evaluate it, we test it, we get NSA involved. DoD-CIO is going to be a part of the discussion. We're going to have JITIC there, all these certified testers, these smart groups, and ensure that what we evaluating gets vetted and approved first. Once it gets approved, which means it's as secure as what we're doing now or more secure, then we update certificate practice statements that says you can use this in the space. You can use that in the space. Once that happens, DoD-CIO don't have a problem, NSA don't have a problem. And those are the cultures that we have to deal with. Everybody else, they don't care. Just make sure my stuff is working.
Thank you so much.
All right, we got 30 seconds. Any more questions? Last question? Yes, sir. Can you get out the mic so they can hear you?
Hi, my name is Calvin Lee from BCMC. So what kind of timeline are you looking at for the modernization, right? Because the organization has existing infrastructure sustained, but then also looking at modernizing. So if it takes too long, there's a cost to that,
Yes.
right? So what kind of timeline are you looking at?
Yeah, good question, right? So we have two contracts, right? So we have what we call a sustainment contract that's already in place. Those handsome guys down there kind of maintain that, right? And so they maintain the current infrastructure. So that current infrastructure is going to keep being maintained until such time as a modernized environment is up and ready to transition to. Now, the new contract that we're talking about deals with the engineering, the development, deals with the modernization piece. So we're going to be doing things in parallel, continuing to sustain our infrastructure, and then we're going to be modernizing, have that vetted, have that approved, tested, update PKI policy, and then begin to transition pieces over. It may take a few years in order to do that. It may take 4 years to do that, but that's kind of how we're looking at getting at that. The current capability, it will continue to move forward. It will be sustained until such time that we move things over. You heard Chuck Alex from Lesic. He talked about is the plan to, he talked about how we currently host certificate authorities in the DISA hack facilities. He said, is the plan going to be to move those certificate authorities out of the DISA space onto the modernized environment, Well, that's going to be up to us evaluating the proposals to see how industry is going to go after that. There's some people that says we'll leave those there. If that's the case, then those things will continue to be sustained until they die. But again, things are going to be worked in parallel to answer your question.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I think my time is up. Really, I thank you for your participation and your time. I know we're in rush hour. It means so much that you stayed out. Again, thank you very much. My name is Donald Parker. I'll be here all week. This is the panel and part of the DoD PKI program. So if you got questions or information you want to see us afterwards, then just come and let us know. Thank you again for your attention and your time.
Yep.